Now, Dominic Raab set out his proposals. Have you looked at them? What do you think?
No, although I can remember quite a few of them from,
Yeah.
I guess, 8 weeks ago when they were mine. And what this is, I mean, this is a preparation for what we don't expect to happen, which is no deal. But in the event that there is no deal, the country would quite properly expect the government to be ready for it. And so right back in 2016, we started work on actually a total of 300 projects, of which I think about 80 of them are going to be announced over the course of this summer. And the whole point was to make sure that some of the sort of scare stories that you've heard bandied around didn't actually happen. Now some of them are just scare stories, full stop, and will never happen. I mean, the stuff about I think from what I gather on the radio, Dominic knocked down this nonsense about using the army to move food around the country. It's so daft it barely requires dealing with. But you also got to have some preparation for things like recognition of drugs, so the drugs that are currently imported from Europe are still legal to use in the UK. A certain amount of preparation in case there's a hiccup at the border. I mean, you used to be a Kent MP, and I imagine you can remember some of the hiccups and the consequences that took place after, I don't know, French lorry strikes and so on. We're preparing for action where, let's imagine one of the European countries decides to be difficult and hostile about it, and let's imagine it's France for a second, then to be ready for that. So all of that work was put in place. In fact, I had hoped we would be announcing some of this stuff in March, but a number of departments were very nervous in March about talking about this stuff at exactly the same time as we had just got agreement on an implementation period. They thought it would undermine the confidence inspired by an implementation period, so it was put off for a couple of months. But that's what's been going on, and it's the right thing to do.
Dominic Raab has said that he's confident that there will be a deal, apparently on Theresa May's terms. Do you share that confidence? And if there is a deal based on the Chequers plan, is that better than no deal?
Well, my view, the reason I resigned, as you pointed out at the beginning, was that I didn't think the Chequers plan actually met the requirements of the referendum, or indeed our manifesto, or indeed some of the Prime Minister's earlier undertakings, earlier speeches, Lancaster House and Mansion House and so on. Why do I think that? Well, first off, it commits us to what they call the Common Rule Book. Now, what does this mean? It means that we're going to have to, our industries are going to have to accept the regulations laid down by Brussels in which we will have no say. Now, the government's argument...
So more of the same, in other words.
More of the same. In fact, actually worse than more of the same. And this is a sort of important point I don't think has been made very much publicly. The government, number 10, have said, well, these rules don't change very much, in the chemicals industry it's been stable for a long time and so on. Well, even there have been 26 changes in 5 years in that particular area. But don't think about that. Think about future businesses. Think about life sciences, where we are world leaders. Think about artificial intelligence, where we're a world leader. Think about driverless cars, where we're a world leader. What we're going to be in a position of is receiving the regulations that govern these new industries, in which we will be world leaders, from the European Union, from Brussels. And so we'll be being told about how we can run our biggest and best businesses.
So would you rather have no deal at all?
Well, I want to see what comes back before I answer that question plainly. But I think what I would say is I think any of the exit scenarios will be better than staying within the European Union. I mean, take the no-deal scenario, which is the one we're talking about today. In the event that happens, there will probably be some hiccups in the few months after that happens. Even if people don't intend it, things will go on. I'm not one of the utopians who say, there's nothing to worry about at all. We just sort of plough through it all and there'll be no difficulty. There will be things we have to deal with, but we will deal with them. And in the long run, because we are completely unfettered in terms of what we can do, we can choose our own regulations, and that doesn't mean we're going to be massively deregulating, but it means we can make the regulations more effective and more efficient than some of the European ones are. We can fix our own trade deals with the rest of the world, reinforcing what's already happening, and that is that our trade with the rest of the world is growing much faster than with Europe. So 20 years ago, it was 60-40 trade with Europe versus the rest of the world. Now it's the other way around. It's not nearly 60-40 the other way. The majority of our trade is going to the rest of the world. It will reinforce all those things. So I think under any circumstances we're going to be better off outside the union. But I do still think, to come back to your original point, that the proposal from Chequers, which I argued against very firmly on the day, will not meet the undertakings we gave the people, and that's for me is the fundamental problem. And since I was the man who would have to present that, I took the view that I couldn't stay.
Well, the reason that I voted Brexit, David, was threefold. I mean, it was first of all so that we could control our own borders.
Yep.
Secondly, so that we could be free of the European Court of Justice and make our own laws. Mm-hmm. And thirdly, that we could be governed by a democratically elected institution.
Yep.
Are any of those three achievable with the Chequers plan?
Well, we don't know what the outcome on immigration will be. At the moment, the Prime Minister is, I think, as firm as you and I on having a proper controlled immigration policy, although there's been some stuff coming out of Cabinet in the last day or so indicating that may be altering a bit. But it doesn't really address those two. But in terms of the European Court, one of the proposals at Chequers is that we would have a common external tariff for goods coming into Britain en route to Europe. So we'll collect tariffs for them. We'll be a tax collector for the European Union. Well, I can tell you now, the European Union will not trust us to do that without oversight, without an organisation called OLAF, it's one of their investigative organisations, overseeing our customs collection, overseeing the way we administer it, which means the European Court will have a say in our country straight away. In terms of making decisions for ourselves, Parliament making decisions, well, the example I gave you about the so-called Common Rule Book will be us taking decisions from the European Union. And it will be worse than now, not better than now, for the following reason. There's a fairly long history in Europe of them using regulations to advantage European industries over other industries. Sometimes this has worked against us. The best example is the Dyson vacuum cleaner. I don't know if you're familiar with the situation, but James Dyson took the European Union to court because he took the view that they had rigged the testing arrangements so that the old-fashioned vacuum cleaners, the sort of the ones of which there are a number on the continent, the filter-type vacuum cleaners, would look better than or look as good as his brand-new technology Cyclone vacuum cleaners. They did that knowing what they were doing. Now, if we're outside, who's to say they won't do that to all our industries? The new ones I talk about, life sciences, they don't suddenly alter the rules on life sciences so that they have advantages over us, alter the rules on artificial intelligence so they have rules over us, and undermine our competitive advantage. And we
David,
know...
let me just put to you the same question that I put to Ian Duncan-Smith much earlier this week, which is this. You're outlining all that could be wrong with the Chequers plans if things go ahead on the current basis. Is there a realistic possibility of that being voted down by Parliament?
Oh, yes, I think there is. I think there is a realistic possibility. I mean, what was interesting when it came back to the House was that the Labour Party, as well as a large number of Tories, said they didn't like Chequers. So it could well be there's a majority against it. I mean, we'll have to see when it comes back, as it were, at the end of the summer after October, what's actually happened to it and so on. But I think there's a realistic possibility of that happening, yes. So
the Chequers plan could be defeated and we would effectively then leave without a deal?
Well, I think the first thing to remember is that nobody wants no deal. This side of the channel or the other side. If you talk to the Belgians, one of the most communautaire of countries, they're terrified of no deal. They think it'll knock 3% off their GDP.
Why have they all been messing about all this time?
Well, because so far they've not really believed us, I don't think, when we said, well, actually when it comes down to it, if it is no deal, so be it. They don't believe that. Let me give you an example of what happens when they do believe it. when they do believe a threat. Look what happened when Trump threatened the German car industry. The German car industry beat a trail to Angela Merkel's door to get something done about it. But they've not beaten the trail about the prospect of having difficulty supplying the nearly 1 million cars that Germany sells to Britain every year. And the reason is I think they haven't taken seriously the option. Now, what will happen come October, November is if we don't have a deal, that all sides will then have to refocus very, very hard. And I think a lot more pressure will come on the Commission. And then we may come back to, I don't know, a free trade plus deal. I mean, one of the things I've left in the department is work going on and creating the full legal text of a sort of Canada plus, a free trade plus, all the best bits of free trade deals that the European Union's done with everybody else in the world.
David, you said something very interesting there. You said that you had left this in the department, but you've now gone from that department. Yeah. Are you still involved? Have you been talking to Dominic Raab, for example?
Well, I thought Dominic's a very old friend of mine, and so I do talk to him. I haven't talked to him about this yet, but I will do when I see him. But one of the things I did shortly after I'd stood down was I asked the Prime Minister, would she put this in the public domain? Now, the reason I did that, I mean, she didn't say yes or no, but the reason I did that was to draw it to everybody's attention that this was going on, this work, and so I would expect it to continue to go on. And so if in the autumn we have this high-pressure situation where everybody's looking nervously at the options, then there is another alternative on the table, available literally, or as it were, off the shelf, immediately workable option, and that'll be there too. So that's the other fallback I would think of.
Have you been talking to Nigel Farage?
No, I haven't. Although you shouldn't determine from that I don't like Nigel. I'm not one of those who's a sort of fierce critic. I'm a critic of UKIP because I think some of the members of UKIP are beyond the pale. But I think Farage is an interesting man. He used to be a Tory once.
Well, he certainly, of course, has brought the campaign to leave to fruition, which there was a time when nobody thought that would happen. Will you be at the Tory party conference?
Oh, yes, I will.
And will you be talking about Brexit at the Tory party conference?
I think it'd be rather hard to avoid. Yes, I will be talking about Brexit.
Will you be saying that no deal is better than this deal?
Well, as I said, I want to see what it is that comes back. But what I will say is that no deal is better than staying in. That's the point. No deal is better than staying in, and that's very, very important to keep in mind.
And if the deal that eventuates is one that keeps us in, if not in name, but in fact and in detail, you would vote against that deal?
I think so. I mean, that's why I stood down. I mean, I think this is not a deal which, as it looks at the moment, this is not a deal that actually delivers on the referendum promise. Now, some of my judgment on that is like what I was describing to you about the way they'll treat the customs arrangement is dictated by how they respond. And if they respond in the way I think they will, then it will not be a deal which I would support. But we'll have to wait and see what the outcome is.
I always thought that Dominic Raab and you shared a view about Brexit. Doesn't seem to be the case, does it?
Dominic Raab and I are very close, and he did speak to me before he accepted the job, and I said, go for it, do it, because it's better you do it than others do it. But there we are. You'll have to ask him what his view on this deal is.
Well, I may yet do so. I may yet do so.
You know the old rules. You've been here, and you know how this works. Ask him, not me.
David Davis, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.